Raider Nation, what's good? Jesse Merrick here. Welcome into another episode of the Silver and Black Sports Network podcast. Today, we're taking a look at more of the young guys and how they've developed with former Raiders linebacker Kirk Morrison. We had Ryan Hogue on recently, and he gave us his unfiltered analysis on the offensive guys. Well, today, we've got Kirk's take for more of a look at the young dudes on defense. We dive into evals of Darien Porter, Tonka Hemingway, and J.J. Pegues, and we also talk some Tommy Eichenberg as well in the linebacking core, and we explain where things have come up short for Malcolm Koonce and what was a big season for him. Kirk knows the game better than most out there, so we talk some offense as well, and he offered up great insight on the rookie receivers in terms of why things haven't quite clicked for them at this point of the season. And I also got his take on the quarterbacks at the top of the draft. He does a lot of college football. So does he like Fernando Mendoza or Dante Moore? Plus, where do the Raiders go from here in terms of kickstarting the rebuild? All that and more with Kirk. Plus, we've got our weekly installment of Raiders Rounders with Matt Perrault as well. But before we do get to all of that, it's time for the question of the day. You guys have been great with this one. Since we're talking to Kirk, a former linebacker, let's keep this one defensive-oriented. There's so much talk about quarterbacks at the top of the draft. And look, I do think that the Raiders need to finally go that route and draft their quarterback of the future. But I'm curious about what happens after that. For all you college football nuts out there in Raider Nation, I'm wondering if there's a defensive player that you've got your eye on, that you got circled for the Raiders in the upcoming draft. I'm thinking any guys from the second round on that you really want to see rocking the silver and black. Let me know down in the comments below. And also, there are a lot of new subscribers to the channel lately, as I mentioned. So if you haven't already checked this out online at silverandblacksportsnetwork.com, please do so and subscribe to our free Raiders newsletter. There is no better deal in sports, and it's a great way to support our growth of the channel and just our brand as a whole. If you're watching on YouTube, it is linked above. And if you're listening or wherever you're taking us in, it's in the description below as well. In the meantime, let's get it rolling and dive into our conversation with Kirk Morrison. All right, Kirk, we got you back in the fold, man. We were talking before we got this going. It's been quite a while since we brought you on the show, right after the Week 1 win, and so much has changed since then. So before we start to dive into everything that's transpired, I'm just curious how you kind of wrap your head around how the season has played out for the Raiders, sitting at 2-12 right now.
Yeah, I mean, not the season that we envisioned. I think this is just not the same team that we saw in training camp back in Vegas, back in August and the early part of September. We've had injuries. There's been obviously coaching changes. I think philosophy has changed a little bit. Just not the same. And you haven't had that feeling since Week 1, like you mentioned, versus New England, where we all thought the Raiders were going to go 17-0, right? And,
yeah, right.
You know, that's what the feeling was. They played one of their best games of the season against what we now know is a very formidable opponent who could represent the AFC possibly in the Super Bowl. So, look, this team has not accomplished, has not lived up to what we expected of them. And I think it took us a couple of weeks into the season to really see the deficiencies of this team that I don't believe that we saw during training camp. A lot of things were masked, right? You couldn't see it, but the layers of where this team was lacking really start to show its ugly face as the season went along. And now here we are. You mentioned 2-12. I would have never guessed this was a 2-12 football team. There's just no way. The talent in which I thought this team had. And I also expected that some of the impact that the rookies would have on this roster would also, put this team, maybe not saying that, hey, they're at the top of the AFC or the NFL, but definitely I would have thought that this would have been a much better performance in the way the season has gone so far.
Yeah, and look, I'm glad you brought that up just about training camp and the shock for a lot of us because we were all there. Like, I saw you camp all the time, man, and we're watching that, and there's no way, like, you can tell if a team's not going to be very good, and the signs didn't seem to be there throughout camp, especially not a 2-12 team, and I think that's kind of the shocking thing. And so I'm curious for you, like, what are, if you had to write that list down of like the biggest deficiencies for this squad, and kind of now as like a looking forward thing, like, okay, these are the biggest deficiencies that need to change going forward.
I think the biggest letdown for the football team was the way the offensive line played. I mean, you look at the amount of sacks they've given up and what they're on pace for. I think close to 70 sacks right now on the season, close to it, that the pace they are. That really has been, I think, the shocker to me. And for me, it's always funny because I always take a second to think back to okay, where did I miss here? What did
Hmm.
I what didn't I see during training camp? And I think that sometimes we overvalue certain positions or guys who are in certain positions. I think Colton Miller is your starting left tackle, obviously, and he's the guy who you extended. But I would say everyone else has not played up to a higher standard. You go from Parham to obviously the Meredith Jackson Powers experiment throughout the training
Yeah.
camp at center and right guard, and then obviously Colton Miller goes down, and now you're kind of bringing in Forsyth to hopefully be a band-aid until Colton Miller comes back. And I think maybe we overvalued DJ Glaze, who's really struggled this season
Yeah.
on the right side. And we've waited for these rookies, Caleb Rogers and Charles Grant, when they get an opportunity. And it took them really 3/4 of a season before they've really even had a chance to even put their hand in the dirt. So to me, if you had to ask me, is there one thing that has really been something that needs to be better from what I saw from training camp? It's the offensive line, because we have not been able to, Jesse, like really evaluate
Yeah.
this team, this offense. I can't evaluate Geno Smith because he's been running for his life. I can't evaluate obviously Ashton Genty because you've seen the next gen stats and the
Yeah.
how many times he's been hit at the line of scrimmage or behind the line of scrimmage before he can get going. So to me, a lot of what the inefficiencies on offense were due to, I think, just the offensive line not playing well.
Yeah, there's a handful of things you can coach around. A
Yeah.
bad offensive line is one of those things that really makes it like fighting with two arms tied behind your back, as bad as the Raiders'
Yeah.
offensive line has been, and it just sucks for the team, like you said, for the
Yeah.
simple fact they drafted Ashton Genty, and you see, the armchair quarterbacks, some of them like us here, or
Oh
like
yeah.
me more than because you played the game, but like sitting up here, and I think Ashton's going to be a player, when they
Right.
get the O
Oh
line,
yeah.
but there's plenty of people out there dunking on the kid, and it's like, man, he hasn't even had a chance to get going. You look at, like you said, the numbers where you're getting hit at or behind the line of scrimmage. A running back like him, especially too, cannot get going if they're getting hit right when they touch the ball. And you mentioned along the offensive line, the Colton Miller is the one you can trust there at the left side. And you noted the fact of the weird experiment with Jordan Meredith
Mhm.
and JPJ. I'm curious. Obviously, JPJ has been injured, so we haven't seen him in quite some time. But from
Right.
what you did see from him, do you think he's a guy that they can bring back next year, or do you think they got to replace 4 spots along that offensive line?
Yeah, I think it's just competition. That's what it's going to be. He's still under a rookie contract, so you're not just saying, okay, we're getting
Well,
rid of him. No, no. There are some guys who have some expiring contracts, but then there'll be a lot of competition along the offensive line next year. We do know that. JPJ has some skills. Now, just trying to find out where is his best skill set. I do believe that the center position was one in which a lot of people were really high on him, and maybe it's because he kind of self-asserted himself in that spot, but I don't necessarily think that that was his best role. I,
yeah,
I I think that when you look at where that position and what it takes to play that position, I don't think that that's kind of the best for him. He's a mauler. He comes off the ball and attacks.
hmm,
And as the center, for him, he's to do make all the line checks and do all of that. That's a heavy load for him. Whereas I see him at his best when the guys in front of him just go knock him back. That's where he's at his best. So there's some things that are definitely going to be changed along the offensive line next year, but the the shuffling a part of what we expected it to be was really more off of what we saw the year prior. And where did that
yeah,
get the team? Right? What, 4 wins, 5 wins? So
yeah.
it's like but this is what the offensive line should be. Well, okay, well that didn't work, and then this didn't work. So it's not a complete overhaul, but there will be a lot of competition, maybe a lot of investment through free agency and the draft.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a good point by you to bring that up from last year too, because look, let's keep it real. Like the previous staffs even, you
Right.
could say, have kind of gambled along the offensive line. Like it
Hmm.
wasn't that long ago that the Raiders' offensive line was one of their strong points. You look back to the Derek Carr years, and
Correct.
Derek was protected most of the time. At the very least, they got above average play from the offensive line, and it has dipped down in a big way. And so, like you said, I think there needs to be some big time investment there. Are you a believer in investing, in free agency along the offensive line, or that kind of draft and develop, because it is a very developmental position?
Yeah, it's a combination of both, right? You
Mm,
you have to have guys with experience, and then you also have to have guys that you can develop and bring along. They're going to be, for with your team for years to come. Remember, this is going to be the second year of a complete roster overhaul. I think
yep.
we all came in and assumed that it was kind of see where they were from last year, add a couple pieces, and then here they are. They're competing for a playoff spot, and then you really get into it and you say, "Wow, this is actually a teardown right in front of our eyes." You didn't believe that because you didn't see that, but then you really start to watch as the season unfolded, and you look at the competition that they're going up against, and you think about the games in which they just didn't look like they belonged on the same field, whether it was against the Colts or um, the Seahawks. I'm not Seahawks, the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah, yeah.
What we just saw against Philadelphia. Like you're looking at these and say, wait, we don't have those caliber players. We need those types of players, and it comes in the offseason where now it's been a hard lesson, but now it's one to know what you need. Whereas last year it's was kind of a trial and error throughout the year.
Mm. Yeah, no, definitely. And we're talking a lot of offense, but that's where the conversation took us. Obviously, we're going to get your take on the defense here. But before we do, I want to
Mhm.
talk to you a bit about some of the rookie receivers as well. We caught up with Ryan Hogue recently. He wasn't a huge fan of
Mhm.
the development that we had seen thus far from Dante Thornton and Jack Besh. I'm curious for you where you stand from what you've seen from those young guys thus far.
It was always going to be development with those guys, right? I think we saw early on Dante Thornton make a couple plays in
Mhm.
training camp and in OTAs, and we automatically had anointed him as the guy because he has a elite skill set, which is his speed.
Hmm.
But you realize that you also have to be able to, in your route running, be able to find yourself and get open and being able to read the defense and know where you're supposed to be at. And so I could sense the frustration from Geno Smith at times, and to a point where we saw him as a healthy scratch a couple times this season. And that to me was hard because you need your rookie receivers to really we needed to see that jump this year. And it never really happened. But I think a lot of it too, and I've always been a big proponent of this because I do college football.
Hmm.
I've always said that sometimes it takes half a season for guys who really come from those spread offenses, like Besh came from TCU or Dante Thornton came from Tennessee, where guys still look at the sideline, right, to get the call on
Yeah,
offense.
that's
And
true.
yeah, I've always said like those types of players, nothing against their great skill set, but it takes them a little bit longer than maybe someone else. Now, look, it's a risk reward situation. Like once they get it, the reward is boom, they're going to play for a really long time. But the risk is they may not be ready for the NFL right away. I've
Hmm.
always said that. And I think we saw glimpses that they were going to be ready. But when the season came along, and teams really started to do things different defensively. And Geno Smith didn't have time to really throw the football. You're kind of forced into doing some things. And there were some key drops along the way for Dante Thornton in some critical situations. So to me, I think that's where the frustration came in because we expected more from the young guys and they couldn't deliver in the beginning, but they've played better and I've seen them get better throughout the season. Right what I expected for them was halfway through the season to really understand and start the game would slow down, and it really started to for them.
Yeah, and I think too, like, I'm a big guy. I'm like, hey, give any of these guys, all these guys,
Right.
time, and because like, let's keep it real too. Like, they finish their college football season, go right into draft prep, and then from draft
Correct.
prep, they get drafted, then they show up and their rookie mini camp, go through training camp, and I mean, they're probably just a
Right.
whirlwind. You've been in that position before.
Hmm.
I can't imagine what that is like, all of that while
Hmm.
also trying to figure out how the hell to play football against a bunch of grown men who were all
Hmm.
the best of the best, of what they did. So like that's one of those things where I'm always bigger on like the give them grace type of side,
Yeah. And then
before
philosophy
you
too,
really
though,
start
Jesse.
to,
Let's be real, like
yeah,
philosophy too, right? You lose your offensive coordinator. He
yeah,
was let go. So think about what has kind of transpired, that the offense didn't live up to its expectation, and so you fired Chip Kelly, who came in uh, to install this offense. And then there's
hmm,
chatter about how is it being installed, what's the philosophy. So there's been a lot of things that have gone on that probably contribute to some of that as well. I've always said the bigger thing to me was the Raiders had lost their offense in week 1,
yeah,
and they lost their offense because Brock Bowers got hurt in that game against New England. And when he got hurt, he was not the same Brock for about 5 weeks, five or
yeah,
6 weeks, right? So almost after the bye week, he was out there playing really on one leg. And I said, if Brock Bowers is playing on one leg, it doesn't do anything for the offense. Brock Bowers is your one true mismatch that you do have. And when he's not 100%, it affected the offense because now everyone else's role goes up, like next one up, next one up. And Jacoby is a really good receiver, Jacoby Myers. But to me, I think he's always been a very good complementary, not a true number one. And that's what he was last year when Devontae Adams was here. He was the complement to Devontae
yeah.
Adams. Now Devontae left and his numbers went up because he was the guy getting the most targets. But I've always said he's worked best being the second option. And that to me was something that we saw throughout this season, that everybody's roles changed. And I don't know if they necessarily fit, but you had to do that because of the injury to Brock. And now guys are in some positions that I don't know if before the season we thought that would happen.
Yeah, and Brock's not just some guy. Like he is
No,
obviously an elite
no,
type talent. You lose a guy that you're going to send your offense around. That's going to be a big impact for sure. I'm not making excuses for anything. Just
no excuses.
talking real
But
about it. Yeah,
that's why I say I don't give excuses, but there are
yeah.
reasons. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. And I'm curious for you too, though, just more of like a philosophical thing. Like we
Mhm.
see so many really good tight ends around the league, some elite tight ends. Can you build an offense only around that one guy, or do they need to get another true number one receiver at that position? Do you think that they can live with a guy like Brock and some supplemental pieces like they tried to do?
No, I think that there's a number one wide receiver out there for him. And
Yeah.
I think we saw it last year when there was Devontae and Brock Bowers. Everybody really had a chance to eat and opportunities to get the ball, obviously, to Jacoby, and you get the ball to Trey Tucker. Things can happen for you. And then if you really get the running game going now, you got some play action and some things going. I think that's where the offense for next year and whoever is going to be the coach, offensive coordinator, I'm assuming, is going to have to build this thing around the running game and Brock Bowers and a number one wide receiver or a complement of wide receivers too. Um, because there are some teams you look around and they've got multiple guys who can be a true number one. But I always say, who's your gotta have it guy? Right now, I've
Yeah.
always looked at our offense and I've said it's currently 89, number two, and then who? You know what I
Yep.
mean? It's Brock Bowers, it's Ashton Genteen, and who's the next guy that can step up? And so, you envision all offseason 12 personnel, 12 personnel, 12 personnel, and then that was the plan. And like Mike Tyson says, what do you do when you get hit in the
Get punched in the
mouth?
face.
Well,
Yeah.
you get punched in the face, and now the plan kind of goes from 12 personnel to 11 personnel. And I don't think our personnel was ready for that because now you're pushing again roles. Dante Thornton from being a guy who will come in to now, 11 personnel, you got to roll. You got to be out there. And I think that's where the offense struggled a little bit. But I think you can build around Brock, but having a number one wide receiver or a complement of receivers, multiple guys who can get open, can definitely help out as well.
Yeah, you definitely need that three-headed attack. I mean, just look at
Mhm.
even though there were struggles last year, it just seemed like there was more space offensively, and the
Yes.
space just hasn't been there,
Hmm.
for this group. Now we have talked a ton of offense, You're a
Yeah,
defensive guy. Let's get to your bread and butter on
you
this
got
one.
it.
We'll start from the D line and kind of work our way up through that group there. A bunch of young guys have been getting more playing time. And that's kind of the thing where, look, a lot of fans are looking towards the draft, and we're doing some draft talk and stuff, but I want to talk about the
Hmm.
development of these guys like we kind of have. And so I'm curious for
Yeah,
you from JJ Pegues and
yeah,
also Tonka Hemingway. Those are two guys that got some snaps in the teens. We haven't seen a huge workload from them, but
right.
from the bits of work that you have been able to see from them over the last couple of weeks as their workload has increased, what have you seen out of their game?
Well, it took them a while for this to peel those red shirts off, right? I mean, both
Yeah.
those guys are out there for a long time, and I mean, you just seeing them inactive week in and week out, and finally you peel the red shirts off and you let them go play. And what I've seen, and I think I'll start with Tonka first because he's the guy who's really got more playing time than
Mhm.
JJ, and I've really seen him start to really the game has slowed down for him. And you really start to see him make some plays. He's gotten a sack. He's went in and had some really outstanding rushes. He's played the run well also. And so I think there's been um, a familiarity for him that he can just get off the ball and attack. I mean, Lecky Fotu has been inactive, and a lot of it is because of the progression of Tonka and JJ, right? So now you have some young guys who are really formidable, and the game is really slowed down for them too. I just think that's the natural progression for rookies, and I think that's the way that Pete Carroll has done it traditionally throughout his coaching career. Is allow these guys to get their feet underneath them, and I think Tonka's been doing a terrific job. He's just flashes now. You know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
wow, the 97. All right, there he is. Okay.
Mhm.
He's making some plays. So to me, he's earned his reps in the rotation. And to me, he's playing on the opposite line of scrimmage, right? On the opposite side of the line of scrimmage. That's all I wanted to see. So that's the progression that he's made. As far as JJ, he hasn't flashed a ton, but you still see the opportunities that are given. I mean, the guys in front of him are still pretty good. I mean, Adam Butler and Jonah Laulu have um, played consistently now.
Mhm.
Uh, and that's all you ask. But when you do get your opportunities, you don't want to see the drop off. And it hasn't been a total drop off, but obviously he just needs more reps, and the
Yeah.
reps are coming. And now we're at the point in the season with 3 games left. He's going to get more reps. That's just the way this thing goes.
No, definitely. And before we do get to the second level and talk some Tommy Eichenberg, as we're talking, it
Mhm.
just kind of popped in my head too. Like this was supposed to be a big year for Malcolm Koonce to show what he could do. Obviously, it hasn't
Yeah.
flashed at the level that many, had hoped. What's your analysis on where things have kind of not clicked for him in a year that I think many thought, okay, this is going to be the guy opposite Max?
Yeah. I think not the standard that he wanted to play up to. I think that he was a guy that coming in, you expected to come back from injury, and you saw it throughout training camp. He just never really felt comfortable. I felt like coming back from injury, really turning the corner, getting a good bend in his rushes, and just really didn't have the impact on the defense that I think we all expected. Um, and to play opposite Max Crosby, you're going to get a lot of one-on-ones, and consistently just couldn't get to the quarterback. And
Yeah.
that's what he was paid to do. He was paid to come get to the quarterback. And I don't think that he had the season he would have wanted. And it's been kind of unfortunate too, because he's had a lot of opportunities and it just didn't work out for him. And so I would say he was on the rise a couple years ago when he had that sack total. Then the injury slowed him down, and I just don't think that he has really psychologically got over coming back from that injury. There's just this flashes, but just no consistency, and I think he would say the same thing.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think you could say that for a lot of the guys up front in general, not named Max
Right.
Crosby's inconsistency has been
Correct.
an issue for them. So let's go back to the second level here and talk some Tommy Eichenberg, man. He got 12 snaps in that last game against the Eagles. We've seen his number, get increased a little bit here and there. As a linebacker, I'm real curious to
Yeah.
get your perspective on what you've seen out of him.
It's been a reset for him. I think last year, it was one in which, Tommy was trying to do a lot and they were trying to put him in some spots and things like this. And I remember going back to preseason that they were trying to find ways to get him a full reset, start all the way over, and let's build this thing back up. And that's why they brought in the veterans like Landon Roberts and Devin White. because they wanted him to see how this game is played and some true veterans and guys that have done it and have some notches on their belt. But I thought Tommy had some flashes throughout the year when he was thrown in some of the packages, where there was the big nickel package where you would have Devontae Adams, who played like a wheel linebacker slash safety, and Tommy would come in and he'd be a spy on the quarterback, or he'd be the downhill linebacker who just came in to really stop the run with a little more speed. I think he's one of the speedier linebackers on the team, and I think he's got some good coverage ability. So he's just been used more in game plan situations, and I think his role would have expanded a little more. But Devin White has been all over the field. He's played pretty good. I wouldn't put him as like outstanding, but the tackle numbers are there. He's played hard. He's played physical, and it's kind of hard to keep him off the field when he brings that intensity every single week. But I think Tommy has done some things. He's flashed for sure, but he's been a core special teams player as well.
Yeah.
And that's really where he's been, kind of laying the groundwork for I think his career as he transitions to being an every down linebacker, which I think is still in front of him.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is like special teams is the proving ground for so many of these young guys, and he's been able to lay that foundation for sure. And I'm curious what the future holds for him too. But another guy, and speaking of the future, Darien Porter has gotten a lot of work the last 2 weeks. Obviously, Caillou Blue Kelly goes down. You don't want to see anybody go down and get opportunities because of that, but that is the name of the game in the NFL. And I think Darien, look, coming off a rough week against the Eagles, but let's be honest, 31-0, it was a rough week for everybody involved. This kid, though, had a great week, I thought, against the Denver Broncos and Cortland Sutton in particular, who's one of the real good X receivers in the league. I'm curious as you break down kind of those 2 weeks together, I guess, because that's the biggest body of work we've seen from him in a 2-week span. What he's shown you about his development and kind of maybe what he could become.
Yeah, I mean, just reps. He just need reps. He just needs to go out there and play.
He's young at the position.
Learning. He's very young. He's very young. I talked to his head coach, Matt Campbell, formerly of Iowa State, now over the head coach over at Penn State. But remember, Darien was a guy who, they transitioned over there. He was a former wide receiver. Okay. Then they said, hey, can you go play cornerback? So he's learning still and learning who he is and what his strengths are, what his superpowers are, right? And the guy who just played special teams in college at first, and then said, you know what, go play corner. And he's starting to do it now and realize I've got great length. I've got great coverage skills. I can be in phase, but I have to also know who's across from me. And he's going to have some good matchups. He's going to have some bad matchups. I thought the Cortland Sutton matchup was good for him because I think Darien has speed, but there's a receiver in Sutton that I don't think was going to run by him. And once he realized that, he was able to get a little more aggressive at the line of scrimmage with his bump and run. I said, you can't play that far off of Cortland Sutton because he'll just box you out. I mean, he's a tall receiver. He'll box you out. And once I thought Darien realized that, he got really sticky in his coverage and was in the hip pocket of Sutton. Now, it's different when you play the Eagles because now you're going up against a physical A.J. Brown, right? You're going up against Devontae Smith, the Heisman Trophy winner and obviously Super Bowl champion. And so a little more shifty, not able to really get your hands on a Devontae Smith. Those are guys you have to play from off. Whereas the A.J. Brown, you want to play up on. And that's where I think he struggled just a little bit in that body position. And there were some great throws. I mean, that one throw to Devontae Smith, I mean, look, you could have, I don't know if you could have handed him any better from Jalen Hurts. He did everything correct. And so people will look at the reps and say, oh, he got beat. No, I think that's the first time he's seen that and what that receiver in front of him can do. That's going to help him in years to come. I think now, now you know what? I can turn my head back. I'll play a little more off. I'll shield him. Hey, I'm also can kind of move him off the red line a little bit, push him to the outside, to the sideline a little bit. Those are things that you get and you learn through reps and reps and reps. And I think, look, he's going to get targeted. I forget what was the game previous to that. I believe it may have been the Denver game, but right before that, he was targeted. Like it was wherever 26 is, they were going after 26. That's just what it was. I think it was the Cowboy
Yeah,
game, I
it
believe.
was the
Yeah,
Chargers.
oh
Yeah,
yeah,
he got
the
four
Chargers game.
targets,
Yeah,
allowed
yeah,
3 receptions there in that one. Yeah,
yeah. They're looking for 26,
yeah,
and
as they
that's the
should.
rookie.
Yeah.
And he's going to learn. It's the
Hmm.
baptism of the NFL. So, you know, huge for him, and excited that he's got an opportunity now to continue to keep growing and learning who he is as a football player. That's all this is now. You got 3 games to do it. You got some
Yeah.
opportunities to go up against some guys who, you know, Nico Collins this week, another big
Hmm.
physical receiver that has some speed. So you're going to see some opportunities with Nico Collins as well. He's got a couple for his former teammates over at Iowa State and Noel and
Hmm.
Hutch over there. So that'll be fun to see those guys kind of tangle a little bit with the Houston Texans. But just some opportunities for him down the stretch as well to continue to grow at that position.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And I think that's the thing that a lot of fans are trying to realize now is like when those young guys are out there, this is where you really watch and dissect and see the growth because these are the things that are going to pay dividends, the following season. And speaking of, kind of moving forward, so many fans have their eyes on the draft. Seemingly for the first time in a long time, the Raiders are going to be bad enough to be in position to actually take a quarterback. They've always been in that weird,
Right.
middle ground or just on the outside looking in. And I guess that's the one positive of having such a rough season is now you're at that point. And obviously we'll see what happens next week in the game against the Giants. That could be the battle for the top pick. But I'm curious for you, so many people talking about the 2 quarterbacks, because this is a weird draft for the quarterbacks right now.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll see what happens with Dante Moore, and if he does go back or comes out, we'll see what that looks like. But Fernando Mendoza, the Heisman winner, between those 2 guys, I'd love your analysis on them because you're a guy that's obviously around the college game a ton.
Well, I think, and this is not a cop-out answer, I've seen some things already. I've covered Mendoza 3 times already and sat down and interviewed with him. I mean, I love the kid. I've always loved the kid. And you sit down with him, you talk to him for 5 minutes, and you realize just how genuine of a player and he is and how much he loves football, how much he's into it, how much he studies it. I love that about him. With Dante Moore, obviously, started off at UCLA and didn't play much, and then kind of got in and then transferred over to Oregon and really has kind of come along, but have we really seen a lot of those reps? Okay. He hasn't played a ton. And when you haven't played a ton, and some people say a minimum of, 20 to 30 starts, we won't have that with Dante Moore. So you're really going off a small sample size. And so this is not a cop-out answer, Jess. I'm just being real with you. These guys are playing for their NFL futures in this year's college football playoff. And they'll have the opportunities. Now, Dante Moore will have more games if they continue to win at Oregon because they'll be playing in the opening round. So he'll possibly could have 4 games, and that'll be the 4 games that we evaluate for Dante Moore at the quarterback spot against elite competition. This ain't going up against the bottom feeders or some FCS and all of that. No. You're going up against some true title contenders, and so it starts with James Madison on a Friday night, and then you kind of work from there. As far as Fernando, we'll see with him in the Rose Bowl, okay, and how he will be. And that's where the evaluation is going to come from. I think we've seen some things throughout the regular season, and that's great. But if you want to ask me, the first thing and these general managers, right, because the season will be over. So general managers, evaluators, they're all going to be at these games. And I think the true evaluation from the guys who I know I've been around always tell me the true evaluations comes when the season's over, when everybody now can get on board on what the team needs are for everyone. So that's where it's going to start. That's why I'm watching with a much more focused eye, upcoming with these bowl games and college football playoff.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point too, because so many people think like, oh, like why was there this big jump or this big change, at the end, especially now with the playoff,
Right.
And it's like, well, like you said, because they're playing against the top dogs, and this is as close to the evaluation in the NFL as you're probably going to get at any point throughout the season. So good take there on that front. Before we get out of here too, look, it's a weird situation with Pete Carroll and everything like that. I think a lot of people expecting that they're probably going to be moving on from him. I guess as you look around the coaching landscape, there's a lot of defensive guys out there. Couple offensive guys. Clint Kubiak is a guy that comes to mind. I'm just curious for you, like what you see in the landscape out there and how it could work for the Raiders moving forward. Any guys that maybe catch your eye, as a franchise builder for this team?
Right now, I think it's just kind of quiet on that front. And that's for multiple teams as well. I mean, the Raiders haven't made a decision on what they're going to do, and there's 3 games left. And my thing would be take a deep breath and just relax for a little bit. I think that this was a year where a lot of things were not necessarily rushed, but put into place with the envision of being able to compete right away.
Yeah.
And then I've always used this one this year because the people ask, "Hey, what happened with the Raiders?" And I said, "Well, I think Pete Carroll was a contractor who came in, and every contractor says, you know what, I'll take this job, and I because I know my resume and what I've done over my career, I can do it." And you walk into this contraction job as a contractor, and you start to open up some walls and do a little bit of demolition, and then you're like, "Whoa, this is a lot more work than I expected. And I don't know if this is going to happen right away." And we've seen what happens. The budget goes up. The timeline now gets extended. I mean, this is just part of life. And I think that's
Yeah.
where I looked at Pete Carroll this year to a point where a lot was thrown on him. Now, in the NFL, we always have to find someone who's at fault. And it's hard.
Yep.
Like, who's at fault? Is it Pete? Is it John Spytek? Is it, the owner? Is it Tom Brady? Is it this? Everyone's trying to find out who's at fault. But I think all the brass and everyone has to come together and say, how do we fix it? Like, now that we know, we see. Last year was just a situation of coming together and having all the brain trust together and going here and going there. Now it's a little bit different because now we see the areas that need to be improved. We know what's going to happen, I think, when it's time for the Raiders to come draft next year. I think we all have an opinion that maybe rely heavily on how they build this roster through a rookie contract for a quarterback. That's just my opinion. I've seen it throughout the NFL so many times. That's why people always say, "Oh, you're drafting a quarterback for the future." I said, I've always said you're drafting a quarterback because you get 3 years of a controlled contract
It's the cheat
that
code.
can build your roster up. Yeah. So that's been my always the take. You may not be drafting the best quarterback, but you're drafting a capable quarterback who you hope can give you, the opportunity to win a lot of games, but build up the roster around them. And you hope that in the 3 to 4 years in which you finally will have to pay that quarterback, that they will be progressed enough and you've got a roster now that you've been able to build and and have guys with depth as well. So I say all that to say I don't know where you head if you do make a change at the head coaching position, right? And I just know there will be changes amongst the staff, there will be changes amongst the philosophy, and it really starts with what are you going to do at the offensive play calling situation. This team will have to transition to being offensive minded, offensive led, not from the head coach, but really the focus has to be on this offense. This offense was very poor. And coming off the last performance in Philadelphia, 75 yards, that is an indictment of where this offense is at. And I think if someone told me right now, going into 2026, if you could change one side of the football, where are you leaning on? You're leaning on offense. And if you tell me no, you're lying. Like, let's go. It's about the offense. And I think that's where the focus starts first before you start thinking about anything with the head coach.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. Figure out a way to limit the snaps for the defense and not have them out there the entire game too, and just get things figured out on offense. You triggered me a bit there talking about the remodel as a guy who's going through the middle of a remodel that's taken far too long and cost far too much money.
You know how it goes.
I know you're a guy that's been remodeling some homes here and there at some times. Before we get you out of here, because this has gone on very long, but man, you're so gracious with the time and the content's always interesting. I want to get your thoughts on Phillip Rivers and what this man did coming out of retirement. Could you imagine? You guys aren't too far off in age. Could you imagine doing something like that? I know linebacker's different than quarterback, but good God, that's crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy. It really is. And shout out to Phillip. I sat back and watched all 27 dropbacks. And to watch him in the pocket and the way that he manipulated the pocket, the way that he had answers, the way that he could see the defense, the way that he got the offensive line, the checks, the way he got the running backs who were in the game, whether it was Jonathan Taylor and the other guys, he got them to, hey, you go here, or you know what, I'm throwing to you hot, throwing to you flashing, to have the motions down. That's what I really was excited to see, was he was able to have the motions and to be able to see how the defense reacted to the motion. He got rid of the ball quickly. Like, this was one of the things everyone's saying, well, how is he going to be? I thought he was fantastic for a guy that hadn't done it in 5 seasons, comes out and really, it was unreal. Gave them a chance to win, right? He had one bad throw at the end of the game, but everything else he threw with anticipation. I thought he threw to guys for the first time and was able to connect with Tyler Warren and Josh Downs and Pierce and Pittman. He spread the football around, but more importantly, I love the game plan. They ran the football a ton with Jonathan Taylor. 27 dropbacks in his first time back, and I was just like, wow. And I watched all 27 of them. I'm looking forward to seeing what it looks like again against a defense in the 49ers that are going to bring it. I mean, that Seattle Seahawks defense was no slouch, and he only got sacked, I believe, once. So he had to play with great anticipation, which people don't realize, meaning that he's throwing to spots and areas blind. I mean, there was a couple throws that he missed because him and Downs weren't on the same page, but could have been touchdowns because he saw it happening before the other guy did. So that's just comes with reps. And that was one of the fun parts, man, going against, watching the guy who I went against, throughout my career. I think we've had 12 or 13 matchups throughout my career against Phillip Rivers. So I know the type of player that he is, and, it was fun to watch him.
No, I think it was cool. I'm curious what it would take to get Kirk Morrison out of retirement for a couple weeks.
Oh, no, man.
That ship has sailed.
No, man, I'm good. No, I'm not trying to tackle Saquon and Derrick Henry. I'm good. I'll pass.
Like I said, linebacker's different. Kirk, man, as always, you're so gracious with your time. We really appreciate it, and the insight was off the charts. Thanks again, man.
All good, Jess, man. Anytime, man.
Hey, another good time chopping it up with Kirk, a guy that's put on the pads and done it at a very high level. His insight is so valuable to us. And speaking of value, we got our guy Matt Perrault. He always finds value each and every week for the Raiders in the NFL slate of games as well in our weekly Raiders Rounder spot. So without further ado, let's see if we can make you some money this weekend. All right, Matt, we're back for week 16 of Raiders Rounders, as we always do. We got to recap the week it was. You said to lay the points. The Eagles came to this one favored by 12. Safe to say that one hit. They won 31-0 with Kenny Pickett at quarterback. How do you wrap your head around that game? Because, look, you called it, and you said this one's going to get pretty bad.
I mean, hi, good to see you. It went pretty much exactly how I thought it was going to go. And I don't know who Kenny Pickett is paying, and I don't know what family member has the burner accounts that are running for Kenny Pickett to be a starting quarterback in the NFL. But if you need me to say 64 yards, I'm going to say 64 yards. That's what your quarterback put up against the Eagles. An NFL starting quarterback, give me a break, okay? This has been a bad experiment with this guy for a while. And that was, I watched most of the game. There were open receivers. He missed Ashton Genty like 4 times over the middle where he threw the ball at his feet. It was just a horrible offensive performance to watch in that game. And then on the other side, you had a pissed off Eagles team that was doing what they had to do. And they went and won the game 31-0 like they were supposed to because they had lost 3 straight games. So it was just a whole entire bad bag of everything nasty for the Raiders last week.
Yeah, 100%. Bad Raiders team. Pissed off Philly team, and then you go and throw any quarterback behind that offensive line, they're going to struggle. I'm going to play the good cop in this one. I feel for the family, whoever that was. I saw it on Twitter, the back and forth. My thing is, it's just like, hey, just don't engage. You know what I mean? Like, we're up here, we get paid to talk and say crazy stuff and analyze it, and I don't think what we said was all that crazy. I happen to really like Kenny Pickett, and I want that dude to succeed. I know you're not. I just like him as a guy. Like, seems like a good dude.
That's fine. Yeah. I'm not talking about him as a person.
No, I know you're not either. I'm just saying in general. Like, I just like him, and like I love these like reclamation projects and stuff. So I get it. I get why they're like in his corner, but it's just like, man, I'm like, I hate it when I see families or anybody connected to it. Maybe they're not. We don't know. We really don't know. So I don't want to assume. But it's just like, God, don't engage. Like,
That reclamation project is circus. Okay.
Oh God, man.
Okay. That's the reclamation project of Kenny Pickett as an NFL fan. It's circus. Okay. So for you Vegas people, tip of the cap, if you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about.
You're over here just making me look like an asshole. There's nothing I can say. If Kenny's family's watching, I'm sorry. I apologize. Bringing this jackass on the podcast. No, I'm just kidding.
Sorry.
We love you, Matt. We love you. But seriously, no, I do like Kenny. I'm not just trying to shill the company line here.
Sure
the Raiders
I'd have
do not
beers
pay
with the
me.
guy. I'm
But
sure.
yeah.
I'm sure I'd love to hang out with him. I'm sure him and I have many commonalities. I'm sure that we could talk about bouncing around from different cities. I've lived in a bunch of cities. He's lived in a bunch of cities.
Yeah.
I'm sure we have a lot of things we could discuss over dinner or something. But as a quarterback in the NFL,
Yeah.
sorry, man, 64 yards is 64 yards.
Exactly. And look, I will say, I think this was the biggest ball don't lie for us on the podcast. Like we talked about, we said the fact that Geno Smith, a much better quarterback than Kenny Pickett, and obviously that showed in that game. I think we're pretty good usually about just reporting it as we see it and just throwing the facts out there. And the facts are the facts in that situation, and it showed. So as we move on now, it's very likely that Geno is going to be back. We are recording this on Wednesday evening. Schedules are tough sometimes, so sometimes we got to record a little bit early here. Geno was a full participant in practice on Wednesday, and when we were talking to him at the podium today, he made it seem like it was more of a trainer's thing. He kind of wanted to gut it out and play. And it sounded like the trainers were like, nope. And they shut him down. So I think being a full participant on a Wednesday practice when they hold a lot of guys out, I would say it's a very, very, very high likelihood that Geno plays in this game this weekend against the Texans. A tough matchup for the Raiders, obviously, as every game seemingly is. And right now they go to Houston as 14-point dogs. That is one hell of a number, but it just speaks to where things are for the Raiders right now, doesn't it?
Yeah, it is. And look, I give Geno some credit for fighting to come back for this game because this is probably the last team you want to face if you're a quarterback with offensive line problems. This defense is ferocious. The Texans have won 6 straight. The Texans have covered in 4 straight, and they feature the best pass rush, arguably the best defense in the NFL outside of maybe the Broncos. This is a really tough game to come back from. In particular, because we've seen Tua get benched for throwing 15 picks. Well, the guy that's thrown 14 picks right behind Tua is Geno, and he is playing in this game against the Texans.
No, exactly. And that's one of those deals where you look around the league and you see, and it's that head scratcher of a thing of how did they stick with him, especially the way the season's gone and needing to see how guys can, play and possibly earn some jobs for next season. We talked about the fact that they're trying to see if they have something in Kenny. If that's all you see from him, I think that sucks for Kenny, the guy, as he does, like he said, trying to make that reclamation project. But I think Pete's going to bring Geno out there, and Pete is, fans hate this because obviously, this is the first time the Raiders have been this bad in quite some time to be able to be in position to possibly take their quarterback of the future. So a lot of them thinking, lose every game down the stretch. And Pete is coaching for his job. He knows that. We've seen the reports out there. It's very clear, he feels like he does. I know what he said at the podium. He didn't say that, but it's clear he thinks he's coaching for his job. And also Pete Carroll it's the whole mantra is compete. So he's going to treat every game like it's a Super Bowl, and he thinks that Geno gives him and this team the best chance to win. I know some fans think differently too, but Pete's going to roll him out there if he's healthy. So it is a wild way to go about doing it, I think. But also, too, I think Pete Carroll staring at it as his age, probably reading the writing on the wall, realizing, hey, if I'm going to go out, I'm going out with my guy.
I don't blame him. I mean, obviously, he wants to win. He wants to try to change the narrative. But look at Chip Kelly's already been fired. So you've already fired your offensive coordinator. But the Raiders, before 2025, had 3 shutout losses of 31 points or more in their previous 58 seasons of football. They've had 2 this year. That's unbelievable when you stop and think about that. And the Raiders, when it comes to their team total, they are an NFL worst when it comes to their team total. They are 4-10 this year to their team total. This week, the team total is set at 10.5 or 9.5. It's not a bad way to bet the game, is to bet the team total for the Raiders under. My only concern is that Geno can at times run and make some magic happen, but do they have 2 touchdown drives in them? I don't know. This Texans team is very difficult to score on.
Yeah, they are. And I will say, too, even though they beat the Cardinals, I believe they gave up 20 points to the Cardinals in that game, if memory serves me right. They won 40-20, I think it was what it was. And D'Amico Ryans, after the game, was pretty pissed off, to be honest.
Yeah.
And he said, that wasn't to their standard. So they're kind of even catching a Texans team that, even though they've won 6 straight and they just blasted the Cardinals, I think they're going to come in a little mad on defense and want to make a point and do what the Eagles did to them. So they could be kind of facing another team that's looking for another get right game in terms of their standard of play. So I see why this number's at 14, and you think that the Texans are going to cover.
Look, I'm going against a pretty big trend here. This year, this has happened 3 times where teams have been double-digit favorites in double-digit dogs in back-to-back weeks, and the dog is 3-0 against the number. Normally, because it's NFL football, when you are being doubted by this many points, there's some pride that comes into play here. But and I'm not trying to disrespect what's going on in that locker room. There's a lot of prideful guys that are playing for maybe not this year's contract, but next year's contract, and they want to show on film what they're capable of doing. This is just a really bad spot. We always talk about betting in spots. You have a Texans team that's trying to keep pace with the Jaguars, and the Jaguars are at Denver. We'll talk about that game in a second. That game is huge for the division for the Jags. If they were to beat Denver at Denver, the division's probably theirs because their next 2 games are really easy. The Houston Texans, this is a game you have to have. You must win this game against the Raiders or you can kiss the division goodbye. So I don't think you get a sleepy, distracted Texans team at home. I think CJ Stroud and company, they know what they got to go out there and do. And I think it's just the Raiders can't score and the Texans will score enough to cover the 14 points.
No, yeah, I agree 100%. And again, that's just a sad state of where the Raiders are right now, that's the case where you're seeing those big numbers like that, and it's warranted. So as we move on now, we'll be talking some Chiefs in just a second here, but first we do have some games on Saturday this week. So let's actually talk about that real quick and dive into that first game there. Philly, who actually just blasted the Raiders, is heading to Washington to take on the Commanders. They come in as 6.5-point favorites on the road in Washington. You still like them there?
Yeah, lay the 6.5 points with Philadelphia. They have shut down Jaden Daniels, Marcus Mariota getting the start. We know about him here in Vegas. Look, I like Marcus. I think he's a serviceable backup quarterback when you need to use him, but they have shut down Daniels for the rest of the year. That signals to me that they want to lose these games and they really want to play for the draft pick choice that they're going to have in the upcoming draft in April. So this is another team you have to watch out for in terms of coming for the top 5, top 3 type pick. I think Philly showed what they're capable of doing offensively last week against bad defenses. I don't like the Commanders here. I'm laying it 6.5 Philly.
Yeah, definitely. And now as we transition to the weekend slate of games, we said we were going to talk some Chiefs. I know even in the midst of a very bad season, Raiders fans love seeing what's happening to the Chiefs. Not the injury, but the simple fact that they are going to miss the playoffs. And this is one of those times where you want to sit back and let Matt pat himself on the back. Because back in week 1, Matt had this to say about the Chiefs.
I don't think the Chief offense is going to be that explosive this year. I don't get the idea that Patrick Mahomes is going to throw the football all over everybody. I don't think that's the case. I think the injuries, the suspensions that he's seeing to receivers and company, and I think Travis Kelce's got his mind on complete other things than football. So I'm not expecting much out of the Chiefs this year. I'm with my brethren who are taking the Broncos to win the division. That it's worth the investment to go 3-1 or 4-1 on the Broncos to win the division, and the Chiefs to be a wild card team. I think they make the playoffs, but this idea that the Chiefs are back in the Super Bowl, I don't see it for a second. I really don't. I think the defense is good, but I don't think the Chiefs are representing the AFC.
All right, Matt. So look, you said that they were going to be not the same Chiefs team that they were. You said they were going to make the playoffs. They obviously did not, but you didn't say. You said that they weren't going to, be the representation for the AFC there. Obviously, it went way south. The Chiefs now eliminated Patrick Mahomes. Tears his knee up. He's done for the rest of the season. I will let you sit here and pat yourself on the back for the simple fact that on this Raiders podcast, you dogged the Chiefs. You said the Chiefs ain't the Chiefs anymore. You called that.
Yeah, and they're done. I mean, I think if you're a Raider fan, I think what you look at here is that this is not just an injury that impacts 2025. Patrick Mahomes had surgery to repair 2 knee ligaments. He is going to be impacted for training camp, and most likely he's going to miss the first month of next season. So if you're Mahomes and you're going to miss a month, and you know that Travis Kelce, I'm not reporting anything, but we all can assume that Travis Kelce is not going to play next season. He's got other things to do. He gets married in next June. Goodbye. Like, he's not going to be playing football next year. He's going to honeymoon someplace on the moon with Taylor Swift. So that's a pretty big knock because your number one guy that you've played football with for so many years is walking away. Andy Reid, you have to wonder how much longer Andy Reid wants to go ahead and do this. So I'm really wondering about a complete overhaul for the Chiefs, because if you're not going to go and have Kelsey next year, and maybe you don't have Andy Reid next year, you're not going to have Patrick Mahomes to start the year. Do the Chiefs just say, hey, look, we'll come back in 27. We'll see you guys, have fun. We're not going to officially punt on the year, but, Gardner Minshew is going to be fine for the next, 5-6 games, and we'll open up 1 in 5 and we'll play for a draft pick. So this is a major transitional time where, as a Raider fan, you're going, my God, you look at the Chiefs, you look at the Broncos, you look at the Chargers. Well, the Chiefs are off the table. It's now Broncos and Chargers, and you got to keep up with those guys, and you got to find a way to get right before the Chiefs get right again, because you do have a window if you're the Raiders.
Yeah, and I think that's the most disheartening part about this, and I'm glad you went there, because that's where I wanted to take this conversation before we dive back into the weekend slate of games here, because the simple fact that the Raiders fans have been waiting so long for this moment that the Chiefs are not that same team anymore, for that opportunity in the division. And the Broncos were a bad team for quite some time. They get their quarterback, they get their coach, they figure it out. The Chargers had their quarterback for quite some time. They get their coach. Now they look like they've got it figured out. And then the Raiders are now sitting in this point where they don't have nothing to build off of, except for the simple fact that looking like they're very likely going to be picking in the top 2, top 3 here. Obviously, many fans hoping they have the number 1 overall pick so that they can take their pick and finally get a quarterback. Mm-hmm. The biggest thing is, can they get their coach? Otherwise, like you said, a missed opportunity here for them in this situation.
Right. And I think that's where Tom Brady has to be held accountable. It's like, okay, Tom, you are in charge of football operations. What do you feel of Pete Carroll? And if you think Pete Carroll needs to be replaced, fine. Who are you replacing him with? I mean, Tom Brady was on a podcast yesterday talking about the fact that he believes that if he was given 1 month to prepare, Tom Brady could play in the NFL right now and be dominant in the NFL right now. So, okay, Tom, you're 48. Vrabel's 50. Your teammate is 2 years older. He's coaching. You ever thought about coaching, Tom? You ever thought about leaving the booth and going in coaching? If not, can you at least see who the next quarterback that you're going to draft is going to be and work him out? And if it is going to be Mendoza, okay, fine. The Giants right now, due to the tiebreak situation, they have the weakest strength of schedule, and they have 2 wins. The Giants will get the 1 pick. They're not taking a quarterback. The Giants aren't drafting anybody. They took Jackson Dart last year. So now if you're a Raider fan, you'll have the pick of the litter. You'll get the number 1 pick. You'll get the quarterback for the future. If you have the 2 pick, you got your heir apparent. Your number 1, your guy. You can't miss on it. It will set you back 5-10 years if the Raiders blow this draft.
Yeah, there's likely going to be somebody trading up into that first pick overall. I would imagine the Jets could be a team that's playing because they have so much draft capital. So that's why that game, the second to last game of the season for the Raiders against the Giants, is going to be so key. It's that toilet bowl game. You got to find a way to lose that game. Yeah. And then obviously now things get more complicated with the Chiefs. When we were talking to Ryan Hogue, former Raiders receiver, he said, watch, Andy Reid and the Chiefs are going to be eliminated from the playoffs. That last game of the season is essentially going to be for the Raiders. If they lose that game, would get the first overall pick. But if they win, they miss out on it. Watch the Chiefs throw that. And that was before Mahomes went down. That was, I think, 2 weeks ago that he said that. And then now everything that's transpired, it's setting up to be like, wow, hey, look, if the Chiefs did that and then the Raiders miss out on their franchise quarterback, that would be a shrewd move by Andy Reid and them to possibly throw that game. I don't think Andy would do that either, but just a wild thing. And I said, I was like, it's a new fear unlocked for Raider Nation in that situation.
100%. It's not that crazy. I mean, if you play Gardner Minshew, you shut down Travis Kelce. I mean, the Raiders can potentially match it, though, just by playing Kenny Pickett. So you just go ahead and match it. You just say, okay, just shut down Geno Smith and play Kenny Pickett. That's how you counteract that.
God!
Just play chess. If don't let Andy play checkers, you go play chess. Just play Kenny Pickett.
See, that's the thing. Ryan Hogue was playing checkers. You just checkmated him with that one. That's pretty damn good. With that, we will keep it going and dive back to the weekend slate of games. Let's talk about the Chiefs since we were talking about them. They're taking on Tennessee, who is very likely the worst or one of the worst teams in the league. I mean, that's just a terrible game to be talking about here. The Chiefs actually do go to Tennessee, though, favored by 3 points. Yeah, do you like Gardner and the boys out there or what?
I don't know. In his career, Gardner Minshew was 4-0 ATS as a road favorite. So I guess bet him because he plays well on the road and no one expects them to do much, I guess. I mean, Cam Ward, the Titans haven't played horribly. They're a home dog. I don't know. Tease them up to 9 maybe and that they win the game by 7 points, the Chiefs do, or something like that. But I would not be betting this game. This is going to be, I won't be watching this game. I won't be betting this game. There are much better games, but it does involve the Chiefs. So it is a divisional game, obviously.
Yeah, for the people that are still listening, let's put them to sleep by talking some Jets and Saints as well. Two more bad teams.
I'm going to make you
promise.
money. No,
yeah.
I'm going to make you money. You want to make
money?
money?
There you go.
This is how you do this. You
Keep
make money by
cash
betting.
in.
Yes, you make money doing this. I'm not saying it's going to be a great football game. I'm not saying anybody wants to watch this game, but you make a mention of the Jets and all the capital the Jets have, right? The Saints are playing really well this year. This is an under game. Okay, the Saints are 10-4 to the under this year. Tyler Shuck is 5-1 to the under this year. The Jets can't score. The Saints defense is playing better. It's 40.5 from a total perspective in this game. I like the Saints to cover the 4, but the under is the best play in the game.
Yeah, interesting one. Look, hey, like I said, it might be a snooze fest. Throw some cash on it. Heal those wounds. A little extra money in your pocket.
Else.
Yeah, exactly. A little extra money in your pocket for Christmas, man. It's coming up. It's a stressful time of year, so why not listen to Matt and make some money? As we move on now, though, let's talk about what is quite possibly the biggest game of the weekend. We got the Jags heading to Denver to take on the Broncos. They go as 3-point dogs. Denver, the 3-point favorite at home. You think that number's not big enough?
I think Denver should be a little bit of a bigger favorite here than they are. So I do think there's some value on the Broncos only laying a field goal. Bo Nix is a much better quarterback at home than he is on the road. The Jaguars offense, though, has been really good, and they have turned the page back to like the 2007 Jags. Like this is the Mark Brunell level Jaguars. Bo Nix coming off his best game, I think, as a pro. He was tremendous with 4 touchdown passes, no picks, 300 yards, no sacks taken. If that's how he plays coming up here against Jacksonville, they'll win this game going away. So if you're a Jags fan, you have penciled this game in as a loss. Like you're a warm weather team from Florida going to Denver, Colorado in December. This has been a loss that you have sent for a long period of time. But all of a sudden at 10-4, the Jaguars are in the conversation for the 2 seed. They're not that far away from the 1 seed, and it's being held by the Broncos. They beat the Broncos. The Patriots lose to the Ravens this weekend. All of a sudden, you're sitting there with a 2, maybe the 1 seed if you're the Jaguars. So there's a lot to play for, but I think Denver wins and covers.
Yeah, it's an interesting one for sure. And speaking of your Patriots, first of all, before we get to the game this week, what the hell happened? You guys were up 21-0 on the Bills.
Yep, and that's a young, inexperienced football team that went to half thinking the game was over. And when you're playing Josh Allen, an all-time Hall of Fame caliber quarterback, all-time great, you cannot sleep. And the Patriots were playing, Raider fans know this, Robert Spillane is an unbelievable run-stopping linebacker. He's not great against the pass, but he's phenomenal against the run. He didn't play. And Milton Williams has been out for a month. He was their big-ticket free agent to stop the running game from the Eagles. So he wasn't there. And James Cook went crazy. I mean, he ran through that team. The offensive line dominated the Patriots' defensive line. And when they scored that second touchdown, it was like, oh, no, you just saw that whole waterfall. But then you had that huge run by Travion Henderson, Drake May leading the charge, blocking downfield, Hall of Fame type moment. But Drake May had the football in his hands. The problem that I think every Patriot fan has is like the Patriots had the ball with 2 minutes to go and they had a chance to go down and win the game, and they didn't. That was a frustration. Like that was the moment I think people got pissed off at, going like, man, that was your MVP moment. If you had won that game, I think Drake May wins the MVP. Now they got to fight for the division, and they got a tough game on Sunday night.
Yeah, no, they definitely do. That making you relive that was for Kenny's family. Just had to throw some salt in the wound there and make you relive that. Fine. So let's go back to the Sunday night game, right? Yeah, I thought I'd weave that one back in there for you.
There's still 11-3. Let's just be clear.
You're still sitting pretty right now. Yeah, but they do go to Baltimore, which I get it, but this isn't the same Baltimore team. They go to Baltimore as 3-point dogs. Explain that to me.
Well, I think it's because the Ravens need it more than the Patriots do. So the Patriots are going to be in the playoffs because they play 2 cupcakes the next 2 weeks, right? Miami and New York. We talked about the Jets quitting, and they have, and the Dolphins just benched Tua, and I don't think anybody really is worried about Quinn Ewers doing much in the NFL. So the Dolphins, in December, January, going to Foxborough is a loss normally, and the Jets are the Jets. So the Patriots will wind up with 13 wins. So they're going to be 13-4 at worst, even if they lose this game here to the Ravens. So there's a little bit of a hangover worry after the loss at home to the Bills, but the Pats are undefeated on the road, and I think there's some fear that eventually they're going to lose a game, right? Eventually they're going to drop a road game. They haven't yet. I like the Pats +3, though. I think it's a great bounce back spot for New England. I think it's a Mike Vrabel special. He gets to kind of, grab the guys by the back of the neck and say, wake up. You can't play like that in the second half. We had that game won and you guys choked it away. So Stephon Diggs talked about it in the locker room after the loss, saying, sometimes losing like this is good because you rather lose in the regular season like that than in the postseason like that. So you get some scar tissue built up by a really bad loss.
No, yeah, I agree 100%. That's why, to me, that's an interesting and shocking number, to be completely honest. Matt, thanks again. It's fun, as always. Before we get you out of here, we've been doing this each and every week, so the folks should know where to find your work. But in case they don't, in case they're new here, let them know where to find you.
Best is on X, Twitter, at Sports Talk Matt for the Daily Juice and for BVB, the Bostonian versus the book. You can see all the content on my X Twitter account at Sports Talk Matt.
All right, awesome, Matt. Thanks again. We'll see you again next week. It's always a good time with Matt. Never a dull moment with him, that is for sure. Looking forward to our conversation next week. In the meantime, let's get to my pick for this weekend. Look, the season has gone so bad for the Raiders. You guys know where this one's going. As we noted, the 14.5-point spread in this game. I'm going with the Houston Texans. That defense is just too good. I don't think the Raiders are going to be able to move the ball very well on them. And then also offensively, it's going to be that death by 1,000 cuts, like we said, with Seth in our earlier episode of the podcast earlier this week. I think C.J. Stroud and company are going to be able to move the ball on them, and I think they're going to correct their woes in the red zone against this defense. I know that's not what Raiders fans like to hear, or maybe some of you guys do, given the way the season has transpired. And again, you're trying to tank for that top overall pick. But yeah, this one is an easy one for me. There's a reason that spread is so big. I think the Raiders go to Houston and lose, and then that sets up the battle for the first overall pick with the New York Giants on Sunday over at Allegiant Stadium after Christmas. I'm looking forward to that one. That's going to be an interesting game. I know a lot of people are going to be doing the whole white knuckle riding on that bad boy to see how that one finishes out. But we'll have a lot more understanding of what things are going to look like for the Raiders at that point in terms of the draft. And it'll set up that final game of the season against the Chiefs, which now, again, has a very interesting wrinkle. We noted the fact that Ryan Hoke's theory about the Chiefs possibly being able to ruin things for the Raiders in terms of the top overall pick could be coming to fruition now that Pat Mahomes is out and that they're eliminated. That's going to be another interesting one to watch, too. Just an interesting finish to the season for the Raiders overall. Real curious to see how it pans out. For your guys' sake, I am hoping that they are able to lock down that top overall pick because enough is enough. This season has been so poor. You guys have been stuck in this weird middle ground for far too long. It's time to get the quarterback of the future. If the Raiders do believe one of those guys in Fernando Mendoza and also Dante Moore are the dude, I'd imagine they get that first overall pick. It's going to be Mendoza. But we'll be talking more about that, in the coming weeks, in the coming months as the draft rolls around. That's obviously going to be a big topic for us in the offseason. But in the meantime, guys, that is all we got for you today. Like I said, this was a jam-packed show. Went crazy long. That conversation with Kirk, as it always tends to go. I love talking. So interesting. I couldn't cut it off. So I wanted to keep going. So this one's a long show, probably over the hour-long mark here as we're taping. So thank you guys that made it this far. If you did and you're not already subscribed, please hit the subscribe button. Also hit that bell icon so you're alerted every time we drop a video. The support has been off the chains. You guys in the comments have been great too. Shout out to Santino. If you're watching this late, your comment, I mentioned you on social media and stuff, and we messaged back and forth down on the comments below. But man, you're the man. That was a really great just a great thing to say, man. The comments of support mean the world to me, especially as I'm building this thing here in year one. Not my first year on the beat, but year one, doing this as an independent. It ain't easy building a media brand, but man, it's been so much fun, even in the midst of a really rough season for the Raiders. And I'm looking forward to the future for them to be able to get that quarterback, and then maybe things change and it's more fun for all of us involved, and we have more games to talk about. Because I love doing the game breakdowns, but obviously that's not what you guys want right now. But anyway, I'm kind of rambling at the tail end of the episode here. So as always, guys, thank you for watching, listening, commenting, interacting, all that stuff. And we will be back at it again on Sunday after the Raiders game against the Texans. In the meantime, though, take it easy, and we'll see you on Sunday.